Hey, what's up, everybody? What is it? Is it day 34 or day 35? I think I forgot to change the number. I'm sure it's day 35. It's day 35, right? All right, so we're talking about state assumptions. What are state assumptions? So remember that state, in case you forgot, it just means like talk about, describe, think about, discover, discuss, communicate, have a little discussion, a meeting. Let's talk about assumptions. All right, so we're talking about assumptions, and day one, day two, day three. Today's day three, and we're going to talk about knowledge. Knowledge. All right, so evaluate the quality. We're talking about the quality of the knowledge that we're gaining. So the first day, we were like, scope. What is the scope? And we needed to identify metadata types. We were looking for sources of information. We were looking at types of information. We were looking at secret words. We were talking about passwords. Were we? We were talking about where to get information about people, about systems. We were looking at keywords, dates. We were looking at what is it? A PDF? Is it a graph? Is it a file? What is it that we need in order to start to do some research? Then day two, we were talking about like what is the information that we're gaining from these data sources. So we start to pull in those data points. What is it exactly that we are trying to do? Now, as you pull in this information, then really you're trying to synthesize useful data. You're trying to bring together so basically what you have is you have a pit, you have a bottomless pit. It's called a question. All right, so remember that if you're teaching, you can tell people stuff. Oh, wait, that's what I'm doing. All right, so there's a better way to teach where you dig a hole first. Because for example, if you just pour water onto the ground, then the water goes everywhere. But if you dig a hole first and then you can put the water into that hole, it holds it, right? It's like, it's supposed to mean like, it's such a deep meaning. But anyways, you start with a question. So whatever question you are searching for, then you are going to find answers to that question. You are going to have to synthesize a variety of different knowledge and information. Now, you need to convert this information into actual knowledge. So you have information on the one side, and then you have knowledge. Like, okay, now that I've done the research and I've read this information, now I know this. And this is what's guiding my assumptions. That's why we call it state assumptions. We want to talk about your assumptions. What are the assumptions you have? And what is the knowledge that you've gained that is driving that assumption? And what is the information that you researched that is influencing your knowledge, your opinion, the way you think about that? Usually a choice, all right? So we need to make a choice. Now, in your own head, you have like all of these divots, right? Your brain's like a golf ball, and you're trying to fill all those divots with information and knowledge so you can make well-rounded decisions. Now, in this process, you are going to you're going to guide the development of or the evolution of systems that capture, process, and provide data. So what is your system? Now, of course, you can see this thing on the edge of the screen, right? So yesterday, I was saying like, the reason why understanding your project is so important is because you're going to have this like, what is your project? And then you got to break your project down into pieces, right? And like a lot of like to-do list software these days help you to break down what you're doing. Like they ask you like, where do you work? And what are the departments that you have in that business? And what are the projects that you're working in that business? All right, so then if we bring one project back to the top, then okay, so in that project, what are the various parts of that project? And to complete each piece of that project, what do you have to do? All right, so a lot of the to-do list software does that, helps you to do that. And then it's around these to-do list items, that's when you bring on your teammates and you divvy up the responsibility, you delegate the work, you make a record of how that work is done, and eventually you achieve the result. Now, if that's research, if these are questions that people have, then what you can do is you take that number one, you take that project over here, and like we talked about yesterday, if this is the one here, and this is number two here, so you take the vertical and put it horizontal, then basically over here you have your scope. This is like the specific data type. All right, so this is like maybe a graph. This is maybe a website. This is a PDF. And then over here, you put in like the information that you got from this metadata type. Now, at the end of the day, you need to evaluate what? All right, so today we're talking about knowledge. What does it mean to have knowledge? So there's two steps. Like one is you have to start to synthesize this information into usable knowledge. And number two, you need to discuss the quality of that data. All right, now the quality, it's like, first of all, you need to know the relevant factors. All right, so when you start to bring together that knowledge, it's like, what does this knowledge influence? What is it that you're trying to accomplish? What are the relevant factors of the decision that you are trying to make? That way, you can start to look at the quality and also the accuracy of your data. Now, I don't know, like I watch a lot of like econ information. I watch a lot of like YouTube videos where they're talking about like the economy. You know, as I've mentioned in other videos, I'm interested in e-commerce. I'm interested like in understanding cryptocurrencies. I'm trying to understand the real estate market. I'm trying to understand how like the Federal Reserve works, how like a world's reserve currency works, what's happening with this blockchain situation. And then when it comes to like working with specific people in my business, I'm helping people to make plans so that they can achieve their outcomes. And I work with people in all different industries. So what happens is like that's like the microeconomics. I get to experience with people what's happening in their business and how that drives their decisions and what are the factors in their industry. And well, usually I work with like mid-level managers, so they're not making like the CEO decisions. They're usually managing teams, and they need to figure out how to manage teams better, or they are doing some type of research, or they're doing some type of sales. They're trying to get more customers, or they're trying to develop management skills so they can move up the management ladder, or they're trying to manage a department. So these are kind of the areas that I've been helping people with. And it's really interesting because I'm able to synthesize all of this knowledge, and then I compare that to what I hear from economists. Now, the issue is like everybody has completely different information. Like, have you ever listened to all these different economists? Like, I remember one time this guy told me a joke. He said the economists have predicted 13 out of the last 8 recessions. And it's like everyone's always talking about like this is the end, and somehow we keep going on. Now, of course, there's going to be some restructuring, and maybe there could be like serious downturns. We don't know because we keep borrowing money from the future. And who do we owe all this money to? So the thing is, eventually you have to evaluate the quality of your information. Like the things that I hear, like what about conspiracy theories? Like where do these people come up with their information? How did they synthesize that information into knowledge? How did they look at the quality of that data, the accuracy of that data to come up with that theory? All right? And it's really difficult these days because there are so many different sources of information. And there's so many different ways to interpret that information and develop your knowledge base. All right, so once you have your database, you're starting to put it full of information and sources, then eventually you have to have a discussion about the quality of data. And there will be a time when you will know whether the quality of the data was, if it was accurate, because you're going to try to do something and you might not achieve the result that you were looking for. Hopefully you'll be able to determine the accuracy of the data that you find. Hopefully you will be able to synthesize that information into useful knowledge. And hopefully that will guide the assumptions that you create so that you can make the fantastic decisions you need to make in order to succeed in your business. This is Space Between Ideas, and I'm Blaine Gates.